I know this is a busy day for you, so we'll try to just touch on a number of little things to get your comment. First of all, in the world of golf, Mickelson, of course, was the fantastic story 2 weeks ago. Mickelson and David Love III right now are in second place in the tournament, and Tiger has gone out. So if you took Thursday and Friday, you'd have to focus in on Tiger. What happened to him with the 82, the second worst round he's ever had? How did you approach that?
I think Faldo had it. He quit. One of the things we were told to admire about Woods, and was quite admirable in him, was that even when he was 7 strokes down on Saturday or Friday, he'd grind it out. He'd make birdie here, he'd make an eagle here, and he'd be back in it, or he wouldn't. He'd accept fourth place as opposed to fifth place. But Friday, I watched him quit. He just didn't give a rat's tail whether the ball went in or out. And
4 putts. I've never ever seen Tiger Woods 4-putt a green. And as you pointed out, the last one he just gave up.
The former number one needed to make a 3-footer to prevent 5-putting.
Right.
He had 3 feet left to 4-putt. He made it.
One other touch would be Michelle Wie looks as though after all the publicity and the pressure that her dad and mom put on her all those years at 14 and 13 and whatever age she was, she, I guess, finally is starting to mature a little bit, and she's doing a pretty good job on the female side.
I think the Solheim Cup, the last Solheim Cup, where she was prominently featured, and the United States team showed itself to be very comrade oriented, and she showed that she's probably a really nice kid. And that we shouldn't take the kid out, the parents out on the kid.
Right.
So I became a fan of hers during that Solheim Cup.
Next, the National Hockey League, the playoffs, the real season underway right now. Right. I know you for a long time were close with the Rangers. In fact, you did a very nice story on the longtime PR people with the New York Rangers this year, and I know he sort of taught you a little bit early on in your career.
John Halligan taught me not to believe PR guys.
But the playoffs yesterday, I don't have a chance to. I know you were at a wedding yesterday, but the Flyers Bruins game.
Caught some of it.
It was like the old days when Bobby Orr was there, and we saw some great games between the two clubs. And I don't know that I agree with the perspective of the announcers after the game that this was one of the greatest overtime games of all time. It was a great game. But I do agree with your comments. I think Mike Emmerich did just a terrific job on the Olympic Games. And right now, I think he's one of the deans of the business.
Don and Doug, I got to tell you something. As good, if he had been doing, say, baseball, basketball, football, mainstream stuff, even anchoring the 6 o'clock news, he'd be considered a real cherished person in this country. As it is, he's cherished among hockey fans, and people who only watched hockey during the Olympics began to understand just what a talent he is, and as good as he is on the air, that's as good as he is off the air. He is one of the most sweetest, polite, accommodating people you'd ever want to. When he was working early on here up for the Devils, he had left Philly, did some stuff, and his wife and family was out in Michigan. I had him on the phone right. I said to him, well, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? He says, I'll probably be here in the hotel room. And I said, Mike, this is probably improper to have this kind of relationship with someone I cover, but get in the car, come down, have Thanksgiving with us. And he couldn't. It seemed he had to go to something or do something. But he's to this day, he's blown away by that invitation.
I'll tell you, what a gentleman.
I put it in on my expenses anyway.
What a gentleman, and not only that, but a couple of funny things, because I worked with he and Pete Silverman for such a long time at the Spectrum and with the Flyers. Pete, of course, went to Madison Square Garden and so forth. But, he's at ESPN 1050 radio now. Yeah, he's really a little bit of a character, and he'd love to talk about prison dodgeball. I'm going to broadcast prison dodgeball someday. I don't know if you've ever talked to him about that, but
that's Pete.
It's one of those things. I mean,
he looks like Wally Cox.
Oh my!
And you would think that this guy's a real nerd, and he's got some crazy stuff bubbling around in his head.
Well, I'll tell you, Pete came up through the ranks and did a terrific job, and is just a great guy as well. We were fortunate in Philadelphia to have, and you've done stories on Harry and Tommy Brookshire and all the guys that I grew up with, and they were not only nice people and forthright people, but they tried to do the best job they possibly could.
And they relaxed. There was none of this, I'm going to blow you away with the information. I'm going to create some issue that we're going to beat to death this half inning. They were just so relaxed. They were alert, but they made you feel as if you were seated next to them at the ball game, especially Harry and Richie.
Right. And
I'll never. There was a great moment on radio before the Phillies opener. I don't know, when did John Felsky manage his second year?
Oh boy.
Well, he's beginning of his second year, the opening day, and Ashburn's interviewing Felsky, and he said, "Well, Skip, what are you going to do this year, your second year at the helm of the club that you didn't do the first year?" And he says, "Well, Whitey, Richie, I'm going to this year I'm really going to back up my players. When they get into it with an ump, I'm going to let those umps know what I feel. I'm not going to lay back anymore. I'm going to get in there and be aggressive with those umpires." And then there's a pregnant pause, and Richie says, "Well, then, Skip, who's going to replace you after you get thrown out?"
Well, you know, the funny thing is that people down here would not be as familiar as they would be with Phil Rizzuto. Phil Rizzuto was a household word in New York and with the Yankees all those years, and Bill White, of course, and Bill, of course, came from Philly as well before he became the National League president. But you know, they knew the game, they understood the game, and Richie Ashburn was the guy who he was the old shoe. He was the guy that Philadelphia grew up with. He was Whitey. He was 19 when he came up from Nebraska. He was,
right.
You know, he was the heart and soul of Philadelphia baseball, and the way he played off Harry Callis could be unduplicated. It couldn't be done.
They were wonderful. They were wonderful. I mean, Rizzuto, for better or worse, Rizzuto didn't pay attention to the game.
Oh, no. Well, Harry,
Doug,
Whitey,
you aware that Rizzuto's scorecard, he invented a designation within the scorecard, WW.
Wasn't watching. Yeah, I remember that.
Or leaving to get over the George Washington Bridge.
GWB was the other one.
He once said that he didn't interview Roberto Kelly because he doesn't speak Spanish, and the guy with him said, "Neither does Roberto Kelly."
You know, there just aren't people like that anymore. It's just, I don't know. Maybe they just say I'm a little older, or Doug's a little bit older. We grew up, you know, just listening and watching, and we start off with the Raposo song, and you know, I remember Ebbets Field very, very well. So
speaking of a little older, Doug, the last time Don Henderson interviewed me, I was about 6 years old. It was 1977. I was covering the New Jersey Nets against the Philadelphia 76ers. They played at the Rutgers Athletic Center in Piscataway, New Jersey.
The Rack.
And Don had me on at halftime, and I only went on because I figured that all these years I'd say, and for a halftime guest we give 4 tires or this. And I remember I got skunked. I got nothing.
I'll tell you the best story about a halftime show. Stan Hochman and I used to do the 76ers on Prism, and we went down, and Ted Turner had just bought the Atlanta Hawks, and we went down, and we were going to have Ted on at halftime. And Ted came over to Stan Hochman, and he said, "Stan, how much am I going to get for doing the halftime show?" And Stan said, "What? How much are you going to get?" And Ted turned, "Well, I don't do any shows unless I get paid." And Stan Hochman said to him, "I'm sorry, I thought you're going to miss the halftime show in Philadelphia today." Unbelievable. Well,
one day I'm standing in the Garden after a Knick game, and Charles Oakley had played a good game, and they grabbed him for the post-game interview, and I think it was with Mike Breen, and he wanted to know what the gift was. And whatever they told him, I think they did tell him it was 4 Royal tires.
Right.
And he said, "I already got that." He walked away.